Hey there, Spartans. It is time for another episode of CyberSpartan Coaching Minutes. Let's begin. I will start this episode by asking you two questions. And you must take time to answer them and reflect on them, because they are really important for the rest of this episode. The first question is, do you hate Mondays? Do you just hate Mondays and look forward to Fridays and weekends? Thank God it's Friday. Thank God it's Friday, finally. Second question is, do you find that it's impossible for you to survive without coffee? Perhaps alcohol, or perhaps weed. While the issues I've mentioned are quite mundane and even amusing for some, they are in essence symptoms of a bigger problem, a deeper problem that is not being addressed. Because dreading work and depending on addictions to sustain the grind are sure ways to make you miserable in the long run. And this is the focus of this episode. Some of you may be wondering why have I decided to talk about this. And the reason is because last week as I was scrolling through Reddit, where I'm quite active and I try to help the community answer some questions, I found this quite intriguing question. Now, what was intriguing about the post wasn't really the question, but it was about the answers that the post got. Just to summarize the content of the post, this is from a cybersecurity professional. I assume it was a guy based on the writing. And he wrote that while he was talking to his coworkers, he realized that not only him, but also them have a coffee addiction, which is quite relatable, right? And what he was asking was, what are the people in the industry, in this case it was the Redditors in the cybersecurity subreddit, what are they doing to deal with stress? Now, what I found interesting about this is that as I was scrolling through the answers, there was no one actually pointing or asking about the job. It was always about, well, why don't you go to the gym? Why don't you do pottery? Why don't you dance? Why don't you find some activity outside where you can find some fun and meaning? There was no one except me, because I answered the question, that brought up that perhaps there is a problem with a job, or perhaps a problem with the way the OP, the original poster, is managing his job and his career. To be honest, none of this surprised me, because we live in a society where people want quick fixes. But no one really actually takes time to look at the problem and try to fix it, try to handle it, try to deal with it, and try to build the mental toughness to actually handle the problem and be comfortable with it. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips on how you can manage your job, manage your career, and make sure that you don't need to seek fulfillment outside work or even seek comfort in substances like coffee or weed or booze to actually get you going. The first tip that I have for you is learn to discern between what matters and what doesn't. And of course, this topic, the topic of prioritizing tasks at the workplace and even in general in your life, it's a topic just for a video in and of itself. But what I want to mention here is just the following. Look around, look at what you are doing, look at projects, look at meetings that you have, and see if you can find a way to avoid some of these or drop some of these. Ask yourself if these are really advancing your career or you are just doing them because you need to do them. A colleague of mine back when I was working at FireEye told me something once that I will never forget. He said, minimize effort and maximize impact. And this is exactly what you need to do here. You need to focus on being impactful on everything you do, and everything else needs to be either automated or delegated. You are not supposed to be a slacker that delegates everything to your colleagues and just pushes the burden to everyone else. No one is going to like you for this. But there are ways for you to actually manage your job in a way that you don't have to deal with things that are simply not advancing your career at all. Because some projects, let's be honest, especially if you are in a leadership position, there are some projects that you are working on right now that are really not moving the needle. Take time to do this so you can drop any tasks that are not relevant and you can focus on the ones that are more relevant. Because if you focus your energy on what is relevant, your energy will never fail you, and stress is going to be something that will belong to the past, for the most part. Now, the second tip that I want to give you is fairly obvious. Drop the overtime. Let me tell you something. You are not going to be promoted by working overtime. That's not how promotions work. Promotions work based on impact. And working overtime doesn't mean that you are having an impact. Of course, you may need to work overtime because you have to deliver a big project, or perhaps if you work in DevOps, or even in security operations, if there is an incident, you may need to work overtime. That's totally fine and understandable. I'm not telling you to drop everything and leave at 5 or at 6 and just disconnect your phone. I don't advocate this. I think you should really sometimes sacrifice some of your time for your company, because it gets you ahead and makes you a good employee. But at the same time, don't go overboard and don't waste your time just closing an extra alert or closing an extra ticket. These things are really not relevant in the big plan of things. You are just burning yourself out. You are spending your time that you can use to actually work on yourself instead of working for the company. Drop the unpaid overtime once and for all. The third tip that I want to give you is have a plan. Lost count of the people that I met that had no plan whatsoever for their careers. And this is just a terrible place to be in. Some people just go, or I'm not going to say some, I'm going to say most people, they just go through the day with their fingers crossed, hoping that everything is going to be just fine. What you need to do today, not tomorrow, is you need to sit for a while with a piece of paper or with your iPad or your computer, and you really need to take time to plan your career and your job. You cannot just go to the office every morning and do the same tasks again and again, pressing buttons and hoping that things are going to change for you. The reason why I advocate that you have a plan is because when you have a plan, you have something to look forward to. Being able to progress in your career is the best way for you to motivate yourself and avoid burnout. Because a lot of times burnout doesn't really come from too much work. It just comes from too much work that has no meaning at all. You don't know why you are doing it. You are just doing it. It's just toil. You have to do it because everyone is doing it and because the manager is asking you to do it. But if you have perspective and if you plan your career ahead for the next couple of months, the next couple of years, what are you going to do next? And this is a topic that I'm going to talk about at some point in another video because it's a very big topic. If you have a plan, then the likelihood of you being stressed and burned out, especially burned out, decreases quite substantially, because now you have an objective and every milestone that you hit is going to give you this boost of motivation and it's just going to keep you going. The fourth tip that I want to give you is be strategic with the projects that you work on and pick. And of course, this depends on your level in the company, depends on how senior or how junior you are. Of course, the more senior you are, if you are a manager, you have more saying on the strategic part of your team, of your work as well. But at the end of the day, we all report to someone. So what I mean here is that you really need to choose your projects wisely. You need to choose projects that advance your growth. And you can not only choose them from the pool of offers that you have at your company if someone is deciding the projects for you, or if you are a manager and you are proposing a project. Pick something that is going to advance you and even your team and even the company. Be strategic about it. And the projects that just don't matter, drop them. And you may think that this only applies to projects for the company, but it's just not the case. I highly advocate that people have projects outside work so they can keep motivated and keep their skills sharp. And with these projects, you also need to be quite strategic about them. Don't waste time working on a tool that is really not useful. And I have to admit that I'm guilty of this. I have a lot. If you check my GitHub, you are going to see a lot of tools, a lot of code that I've written in the past. Tools for offensive security, tools for malware analysis, tools for infection of binaries. I have a tools for this as well. DNS brute forcer. And for some of these tools, I spend so much time on them, trying to tune them and make them good and write documentation for really no purpose, because no one was going to use them beyond me. So drop this project. And one thing that I'm going to say about side projects is this. Choose something as a side project that is not the same thing, not the same topic, and not the same task as the one that you have at your workplace. The reason for this is quite obvious. You don't want to have a hobby that looks like a job, because otherwise you are going to get tired of your job in the end. Now, as an example, I work in security operations. I'm a security operations manager and engineer, so I have experience not only in incident response, in managing teams, but also in engineering and building stuff. So what I have as a side project is AWS infrastructure. As an example, you can create your own infrastructure, harden it, and then if you want to go the extra mile, you can try to attack it. You learn how blue team works and you learn how red team works. Finally, the fifth tip that I have for you is make yourself at home at work. And I know that a lot of people are going to bash me for this because they say, I just want a job, I want to get paid, I don't want to love my company or spend time with my colleagues. But trust and believe, the best thing you can do for yourself is actually learn to be comfortable at your workplace. And there are many ways to go about this. The easiest way is to actually build good relationships with your colleagues, with your co-workers, with your manager, with other teams. Extend your capabilities beyond the technicals. Learn to be a good co-worker, a good colleague, someone that helps another team, another person. And as another example of something you can do, mentor someone else. And pass as much knowledge as you can, because sometimes you have a junior person that is really inexperienced, they don't know what to do, and they are really eager to work with someone with your competence. It doesn't matter how high or low are you in the hierarchy, you have something to teach. Another piece of advice would be to just lead change in your company. You see something that is inefficient, try to make it more efficient. You see opportunity to automate. You see an opportunity to create a project, to assemble a team, to create a new process, just do it. Take the initiative. Pretend that the company is yours and try to change it, try to improve it. This is the best way for you to integrate yourself in the company and make sure that the company is not something annoying that you have in your day that you have to deal with. It's part of your life. Now, as I was preparing this video and as I wrote the original posts, I was reminded of a quote from a book that I really like called The Fifth Law from Robert Greene. I'm a huge fan of Robert Greene, and also a huge fan of 50 Cent, actually. And this book was actually written by him in cooperation with 50 Cent. And there are a lot of good lessons there, but one that really stuck with me was something about reality. And 50 Cent said, quote, "Reality is my drug. The more I have of it, the more powerful I feel." And this really encapsulates the spirit of this video. My objective here is to help you understand that in life you cannot really search for shortcuts. Of course, I started with a caffeine addiction and hating Mondays, but as you understand at this point, it's a bit more than that. It's usually a symptom of a bigger problem that people just don't address. If you want to have a good life, you need to find pleasure and fulfillment in your work as well, not only outside. Because otherwise, this compartmentalization is going to just hurt you in the long term. You are going to always hate your job. What I want you to do is to just learn how to manage your job. Learn how to become a good employee, a good professional. Learn to handle the stress. Learn to face the problems rather than trying to run away from them. Learn to build a tough mind, which is something that is going to serve you in the long term more than finding an extra activity outside to make your life a bit more interesting. And there you have it, Spartans. 5 tips on how to manage your job, your career, and how to have a less stressful life. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button so you can keep track of all the videos that I post. Until next time, stay safe, stay paranoid.